All right, today we're diving into the story of one of the most fascinating and, let's be honest, controversial figures in India's fight for independence, Subhash Chandra Bose. His story is just incredible. It's all about rebellion, some seriously bold alliances, and a death that was wrapped in mystery for decades.
So let's just jump right into the heart of the enigma, the one question that really frames this entire story. Seriously, think about it. How does one of India's most important freedom fighters end up dying in a plane crash on an island thousands of miles from home? It's a question that stumped people for years and fueled all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Okay, so here it is. This is the core fact, and it's a wild one. August 1945. The whole world is just breathing a sigh of relief as World War II comes to a close, and a key leader of India's independence movement dies in a Japanese army hospital in Taipei. To even begin to understand how he got there, we've got to rewind and go all the way back to the beginning.
So first up, let's talk about who Bose actually was. Because he wasn't your typical politician. Nope. From the very start, he was a rebel, and his entire identity was forged in his fight against the British Empire.
Born back in 1897, Bose was, brilliant. He was educated at top universities, including Cambridge, and he even passed the super competitive Indian civil service exams. But then he did something that just sent shockwaves. He resigned. It was this huge act of defiance. He basically said, there is no way I'm going to be a part of the colonial system I'm trying to tear down.
And this right here, this captures the massive ideological split in India's freedom struggle. On one side, you have the icon Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy of nonviolent resistance. And on the other side, you have Bose. He was convinced that freedom would never just be handed over. It had to be taken, and by force, if that's what it took. This disagreement, it defined his entire life and led him to make some truly shocking choices. And yeah, that path led him straight into the chaos of World War II, where he fully embraced this really controversial idea. My enemy's enemy is my friend.
I mean, this part of his life reads like something out of a spy movie. Seriously. So he gets arrested by the British. Then he stages this daring escape from his own house under lockdown. He sneaks his way to Afghanistan, hoping the Soviet Union will help him out. But they say no. Does he give up? Not a chance. He heads to Berlin and goes straight to the top, seeking an alliance with Hitler's Germany.
And once he was in Germany, he was all business. He started organizing Indian soldiers who'd been captured by the Germans into his own fighting force. He got on the radio and broadcast propaganda back to India, trying to spark a revolution. And, amidst all of this high-stakes political drama, he also found a personal connection, starting a family with an Austrian woman named Emilie Schenkel.
Just when you think his story can't get any crazier, it does. So Japan enters the war, and Bose sees a new, maybe even better, ally in Asia. But how do you get there in the middle of a world war? Well, he embarks on this unbelievably dangerous 3-month-long journey, transferring from a German U-boat to a Japanese submarine in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I mean, can you imagine? It's totally unprecedented.
So now he's in Asia, and this is where everything builds to a climax. The final, dramatic, and ultimately tragic chapter of his life. His last big gamble to free India.
So, with Japan's backing, Bose takes command of the Indian National Army, or the INA. This army was made up of Indian expatriates and, this is the crucial part, tens of thousands of Indian soldiers who the Japanese had captured. Their mission was singular and incredibly ambitious: march from Burma and invade British-held India.
In 1944, they went for it. They launched their invasion. But honestly, the timing was just awful. The tide of the war had already turned against the Axis powers. The INA and their Japanese allies got bogged down and defeated in the brutal jungles of Burma. And just like that, Bose's dream of liberating India with an army was completely crushed.
And now we get to those final days, and you can see just how quickly everything fell apart. August 15th. Japan surrenders. For most people, the war is over, but not for Bose. 2 days later, he's already planning his next move: escape to Manchuria and try to get the Soviets on his side. But he never makes it. The very next day, the plane he's on crashes on takeoff, and he dies that night in a hospital from his injuries.
Now, you would think that's the end of the story. A dramatic, tragic end for a revolutionary. But in a strange twist, his death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a mystery that would last for decades.
And that brings us right back to our big question. The facts seem pretty straightforward, right? So why on earth did so much confusion and conspiracy swirl around his death for so long?
Well, the answer really lies in the absolute chaos of that specific moment in time.
It was pretty much a perfect storm of confusion. For one, Taiwan was in a total power vacuum, transitioning from 50 years of Japanese rule to Chinese control. In all that turmoil, official records of the crash just vanished. Later, when the new Indian government started asking questions, the authorities in Taiwan basically shrugged. They had no idea. This created a void, which was the perfect breeding ground for rumors. And then, to make things even weirder, a bunch of imposters started popping up in India, all claiming to be Bose, returned from the dead.
But eventually, the real story was pieced together and confirmed. Bose died that night in the hospital in Taipei. His body was cremated, and his ashes were later taken to Tokyo, where they remain today in the Renkoji Temple, a final, distant resting place for a man who spent his entire life fighting to get back home.
So this leaves us with one last, really challenging question. Bose's dedication to Indian freedom was absolute. Nobody denies that. But to achieve that goal, he allied himself with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. So how do we square that? How do we remember him? As a patriot or a collaborator? It's the complex, pretty uncomfortable question at the very heart of his legacy, and it's one that, even today, history is still trying to figure out. Thanks for joining this explainer.